So I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of standards for what I'm calling transcription, and then afterwards captions. And when I use transcription here, it's more to describe the actual act of transcribing the audio as compared to a transcription that would have no timestamps or anything like that. So right now there's no sort of universally accepted style guide for how the audio should be transcribed. So we have standards that we use here and that seem to be applied throughout the captioning universe. I think the first one that's very basic and that is applied everywhere is that spelling should be at least 99% accurate, and that in the text both uppercase and lowercase letters should be used. It's easier to read and it's better for reading comprehension. The other thing that we like to do is when multiple speakers are present, it's good to show when there's a speaker change, if everyone's on screen, and if someone's speaking off screen, to identify them somehow with a label. So you might be using, when speakers change, a dash to indicate that there's a new speaker talking if everyone's on screen, or a double caret. And when they're off screen, you might have the name of the person actually speaking and then the text that they say, just to help with comprehension for the person who's reading the captions. And the other thing with speaker labels is that you want to make sure, if you are labeling someone who's off screen or on the telephone, that you're not actually revealing a plot point. So if there's a mysterious caller calling in and on a horror movie, you certainly wouldn't want to say the name of the murderer if at the beginning it's just a mysterious voice. So you always want to be keeping the plot in mind as you are transcribing the audio content, to make it so that it'll be most comprehensible for the person reading the captions without actually revealing plot points too early. The other thing that you want to make sure you do, and which distinguishes captions from subtitling, is that you want to capture non-speech sounds. So if there's music playing, you want to put that in. If there's laughter in the room, you want to be including that. Sounds like that, we typically set off with square brackets to show that it's a sound. And again, sound effects that are pertinent to the plot should be included, but you don't need to capture every single background noise that's happening in the film or show, as that can be distracting. So example is if someone's sort of walking along the street and you see them and they happen to have their keys in their hand and you hear the keys jingling, you certainly don't need to put in that sound effect. But if someone's in a room and you hear off screen that keys are jingling to open a door, you want to include that because that's part of the plot and the person on screen may then react to that. Another example is, if someone's in a busy bullpen in a newsroom, so there are telephones ringing everywhere, you don't need to capture every telephone that rings in the background unless it's affecting the plot as it happens. So that's something to keep in mind. You also want to make sure that you're using punctuation for maximum clarity. It's pretty self-explanatory, but you want to have, you don't want to put in a descriptor. So if someone's shouting, you don't want to put shouting hi, and then that's taking up a lot of caption frame. If you can convey that with punctuation, so just hi with an exclamation point, then that's much better and that's more clearer for the person who is reading the captions and also trying to watch a program at the same time. The other thing that you want to do is, if someone is speaking with an accent throughout the whole film, you don't necessarily want to be transcribing their speech phonetically. If someone has a thick accent, if you're transcribing every word phonetically because it isn't quote-unquote, proper English, that becomes very hard to read. So you still want to be adhering to normal spelling of words. If someone does happen to put on a fake accent for, a scene or a line or two, you can denote that in parentheses to say that they're, talking with speaking with a Scottish accent or something like that, as to convey that it's not the typical way that they speak. The other thing that Josh mentioned earlier was that you want to be as close to verbatim as possible. So you want to be capturing as much of the content as you can that makes sense. So for a scripted show, you would be including every that a person says, every stutter, every stammer, because it's intentionally said, the movie's been edited that way. There's a little more leeway for reality shows and documentaries that have interviews with people because people don't speak proper English. And if they're saying every other word, and that's in the captions, it becomes very hard to digest that content. But any scripted show definitely should be verbatim, and even any reality show or documentary show should be as close to possible of verbatim without capturing every single stammer and stutter that makes the captions difficult to read. And then just finally, some quick standards actually for how the caption should be presented. The font style should be a non-serif, such as Helvetica Medium. Each caption frame should hold 1 to 3 lines of text on screen at a time, so it shouldn't fill up the whole screen because you still want to see the action that's happening on the screen. Each line should not exceed 32 characters. The minimum duration should be at least 1 second so the person has time to actually read the caption. And then if there's extended sound effects, like there's music playing, a full song is playing, you don't want to keep up that whole caption on the screen at the whole time. So you want that to drop off after 4 or 5 seconds. And then each caption frame should be replaced by another caption unless there's a long period of silence. So again, same thing with that music tag. If someone speaks and then there's 15 seconds of silence, you don't want their caption frame to hang out on screen throughout that whole silence. It makes it look like they talked for longer than they did, and it's unnecessary. All caption frames should be precisely time synced to the audio, so they should appear when the person speaks, and when they start the next sentence, the new caption frame should come on, or the next part of that sentence. And then finally, caption frames should be repositioned if it obscures on-screen text. So if there's burned-in subtitles, for instance, we have the ability to then move those caption frames that we normally have in the bottom up to the top of the screen to not obscure the on-screen burnt-in subtitles.